The trophy presentation. On the podium at the end, Donald Trump. What did you make of that?
This is the Park the Bus podcast with Stephen Caldwell and Kevin Kilbane.
I'm delighted to say that we've got Mark Ogden from ESPN joining us now. Mark, you've been at the Club World Cup for the last few weeks, and it's been, there's been a lot written around the tournament itself, but how did you view it in general?
Well, you know what it's like when you're in a tournament, you're in a bit of a bubble, so you kind of don't get the criticism that goes its way. I was at home for the first 2 weeks, and obviously the group stage there's a lot of criticism about it, the heat, the pitches, the weather delays. But since I've been out here, I think it's run pretty well, to be honest. I think, since the good games, I think the standard of football in the knockout stage has been very good. I thought PSG were outstanding until the final, but I think overall, I think the tournament's been good, and I think what's kind of made it better as well is the fact that Brazilian teams have done well. We had a couple of shock results with certainly Man City losing to Al Hilal. Inter Miami made it to the knockout stage. So I think it's been good. I just don't like the way it was kind of brought about and how certain teams were kind of parachuted in. But overall, I think it's been a success.
There's a lot that we're going to get in that you've even mentioned there, but do you think it's going to become a regular thing, a regular occurrence now going forward?
Well, there was a media event with Gianni Infantino on Saturday, and he was asked that question because there's been a bit of a rumour that it could be every 2 years, which would not go down well with anybody, I don't think. But he said the next version will be 2029, so it will happen again. Where it'll happen, we don't know yet. I know Brazil are very keen to host it in 29, but obviously the World Cup in 2030 is in Spain and Portugal and Morocco. So it could kind of replace the old Confederations Cup in the sense that it's used as a kind of a testing ground for the host nation of the World Cup 12 months out. But it'll definitely come back. They need to tweak a few things, don't they, in terms of there's probably too many teams from Europe, not enough teams from around the world. But it's a good starting point, and obviously it ended well with big crowds and some good teams in the latter stages.
Yeah, I'll ask you about the crowds, Mark. Obviously, in the beginning, the crowds were down a little bit, weren't they? And I think the overall average was high 30s, 37, 38,000. Did you feel like once the kind of quality of both sides that were playing against each other improved, that was the reason the crowds improved, or was it more the knock-on effect of the tournament and the publicity around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some kind of unfortunate fixtures. I think the Mamelodi Sundowns game against Ulsan was watched by about 3,000 people, but let's be honest, it was middle of the day in Orlando. You've not got a massive South African or Korean community in that place, so some games are hard to fill the grounds. But with a World Cup, it's totally different. You've got, if your country's playing in a part of the country you live, you'll probably make the effort to go there. But certainly in the knockout stages, it got better. But for me, I think a lot of the issues with the weather. I mean, some games were played at midday, some at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun was beating down. And I was at the MetLife for the semis and the final, all played at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And to be fair, they did well to fill it, because if you live in New York or New Jersey, it's 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Are you really going to go to a football match, sit in baking heat? But a lot of people did. So there's a few issues to address, but I think, definitely, once the group stage is finished, I think 1 million tickets were unsold in the group stage. But beyond that, I think it was definitely working well. And I was in Philly for the Chelsea-Palmeiras game, and the Palmeiras fans really took over the city. So that made it good as well, the fact that the South Americans don't have far to travel, a big Brazilian, Argentinian community on the East Coast. So that helps as well.
We were in MetLife, weren't we, Kevin, this time last year for Copa America and preparing for Argentina against Canada in the semi-final. And the baking heat that we were in, the conditions were just unbelievable. So as the time of these games, MetLife's a great stadium, as we all know, having been there, and it's a great atmosphere once the game starts. But there's no roof, there's no cover, there's this sort of high concrete stadium. So, whatever pitch temperature is probably 5, 10 above what it's saying on the thermometer. Do you feel like the times of these games, the sort of the fact that the World Cup final is likely going to be an afternoon game next summer is going to be detrimental to the quality of football and really upset potentially a European team if they're in it?
It's going to be really tough. I mean, I spoke to some of the guys at FIFPro. I'm not sure if you're kind of aware of what they do. They represent 66,000 footballers across the world. They are like the global players union, and they're really unhappy about some of the conditions that they've been played in. And without getting too technical, there's a measuring gauge called the wet bulb globe temperature, and it's kind of it brings together humidity, the temperature, all factors that kind of contribute to the weather. And on their gauge, on their threshold, 3 games in this tournament should have been either postponed or delayed, because the weather was the conditions were so intense that it was not fair for the players to play. Now, I think there was something like, I think it was 29.6 on their scale, and their threshold is 28. FIFA's threshold is 32, so it's a lot higher than the actual players' union's threshold. But I spoke to a climate expert, and he said, well, it's bad for the players. It's really bad for the players. They shouldn't really be playing in that. But like you said, Steve, in terms of the fans, they're sat on a plastic seat on a concrete step with the sun beating down. Sometimes they've had a drink, and I'm not saying they've had a drink of water. So you can imagine how it affects them. So I think we're going to have a few issues next year. We could have players in difficulties, but also fans in difficulties as well, because it's really, really hot. But the flip side is, you know, Kevin, you've played in the World Cup, you played in the Far East in 2002. Wherever you play a World Cup in the summer, it's hot. You know, I remember the England team in that World Cup complaining about how hot it was in Japan. So the next World Cup in Spain, Portugal is going to be really hot. I don't know what you do. I mean, do you move it all to winter? It's a tough one. You're going to have hot temperatures. But Gianni Infantino said at the weekend, and I don't know how much he can push this through, but as we know, he can do what he wants. He said that the next year there's going to be more games played during the day in covered stadiums. But they've only got 4. They've only got 4 covered stadiums, and that's not enough to cater for all the games. You know, I think it's Vancouver, Atlanta, Houston, and Dallas. You need probably a couple more if you're going to play the daytime games on the cover.
I think as well, Mark, within that as well, Gianni Infantino has constantly spoke about player welfare, and obviously it's got to be the priority, I think, really into this. You mentioned supporters there as well, that's going to be sitting there in those baking temperatures. I was listening to Enzo Fernandez talking recently as well, talking about they're almost passing out after the game. We've seen a lot of the games finishing up with players stretched out on the floor. I mean, how this is going to impact, it might be something we can speak about a little later for next season into various leagues around Europe and across the world. But how is this going to affect the World Cup next year? How are we going to see a different World Cup because of this? Because I know what you're saying there. Yeah, I did play in Japan, and we've all played in various hot conditions, whether we've been in pre-seed or not. But this is the extreme. This is right at the very top. This is beyond anything in various parts of the States, especially, and certainly down into Mexico. It's going to be very different from up here in Canada. So how is this going to be? You mentioned FIFPro. Have they backed down a little bit? How? Because something else, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but you spoke about there has been a meeting and Gianni Infantino has come to an agreement, but FIFPro have not really been part of this agreement, have they? So how is all this going to measure out for next year?
Yeah, that was another bit of a classic FIFA move. So I get an email on Saturday night. I'm in New York, and 7 o'clock Saturday night, midnight UK. So it's a strange time to bury what would appear to be a good news story, in the sense that players and FIFA have come to an agreement and it's all happy. They're going to get 72 hours between games. They're going to get 3 weeks in the summer. So wake up on Sunday morning to an email from FIFPro saying, hang on a minute, we were even invited. We know nothing about this. The people that were there have got nothing to do with FIFPro. Some have been expelled from FIFPro in the past. So it seems like FIFA have kind of almost railroaded this through. So I don't know how much power FIFPro have. I mean, the players have the power, but they don't seem to use it. Do you know what I mean? If the players came together and said, right, we're not playing, then no games would happen. They are the ultimate, you know, arbiters in this. They can make the decisions that they want, but they don't. And there's lots of reasons for that, you know, that a lot of them aren't in a position to do so, I guess, in terms of lower down the leagues, they can't strike. But, you know, next year there's going to be a lot of issues. It's a long season. A lot of players coming off the back of this. You're going to have Premier League, Champions League, all sorts of domestic leagues. They're going to get to the World Cup. A lot of them are on their knees. And it will impact the standard of the play. It'll be a lot slower. And don't forget, these players are training every day as well. They're not just playing games and going away and spending 3 days in an air-conditioned hotel. They're training all the time. And on the one hand, you say, well, they're getting used to the heat. But on the other hand, they're getting more and more drained by it and more struggling with it. Because I was in Miami for the Real Madrid-Juventus game. And it wasn't hot on the temperature gauge. It wasn't like 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It was something like 80 degrees, but it was unbearable. I actually couldn't sit outside. I had to go back inside to the press room. But after the game, Igor Tudor, the Juventus coach, said that 11 players has to be taken off. That's how bad it was. And that for me is not right. You shouldn't be asking footballers or anybody to play in conditions that are just dangerous, really, to their health. It was just so unbearable. So in the World Cup next year, we're going to get that. We're going to get a situation where teams just can't cope.
So what can be done, do you think, Mark, to fix that? How we talked about just 4 stadiums that have got roofs and can be climate controlled. Is there? I don't think it's going to happen at this stage, but can they? There is more stadiums in the US that can accommodate, have roofs and can be climate controlled. Is there an opportunity maybe for that to happen? Or, you know, we talk about kickoff times, but at the end of the day, dollars and pounds are king, and whenever these games are supposed to be played, it's going to be the best for audience figures and advertising. That's how it's going to happen. So what do you think can be done to combat this? Is there anything?
Well, it's difficult for FIFA to say to cities that have got stadiums without roofs that, sorry guys, we're going to give you 10 games, but we're going to give you 5 now because they're moving some games to stadiums with roofs. They'll have signed contracts, there'll be money involved, and it's going to be difficult to do that. I mean, obviously, FIFA has said we don't want any games in Florida during the day. MLS don't allow games to be played in Miami or Orlando during the day. They all kick off in the evening. So I think FIFA will have to kind of accept that certainly games in Miami, maybe even in Mexico, to kick off at night. But the problem with that is, if you've got, I don't know, England versus Italy in Miami, if you play that at 8 o'clock at night in Miami, that's like 4 o'clock in the morning in Europe. So the TV companies aren't going to allow that because they're putting all the money into to broadcast these games. So it's trying to find a way to make it all work, that kickoff times that suit the players and the fans, but also that suit the TV companies that are putting a lot of money in and the sponsors who want their branding out there across the world. So there's going to be some games that fall through the gaps. There's no way they're going to be able to get all these games in. But you know, one thing I say about Gianni Infantino is, and I'm not a fan, I'm not sure how many people are, but he found a way to get into Miami, into the Club World Cup. How? Because he wanted it to happen. So if he wants 2 or 3 more stadiums with roofs on next year, there's one in Las Vegas. I mean, Las Vegas hosting World Cup games sounds like a good idea to me. But can he do that? He can do what he wants.
Yeah, it does seem that way at times, doesn't it? As well, there's I don't know. There's so many different aspects to this as well. And I mentioned before about player welfare and the impact it's going to have on club seasons coming forward with Burnout and everything that's going to go forward with that now, Steve. I think it's something that's really interesting to me. You know, Chelsea's now profile is raised because of what they did and how they demolished PSG in that final. But are they going to suffer burnout come Christmas time? Are they going to suffer burnout come the real back end of the season when they need it? But also, how's the World Cup going to be affected by this Club World Cup next summer as well? Because players cannot be expected to go through season upon season, summer after summer. I remember even Kevin De Bruyne talking about this, going back 5 years now, and Thibaut Courtois saying, we are not robots, we cannot do this anymore. And I think that's got to be the interesting thing here, Mark, about how, what are players going to do going forward? Because this has been a continuous thing. Money talks, as Stevie spoke about just before, but players cannot raise the levels and continue to raise the levels to what's expected of them with these amount of games they're expected to play.
Well, I think Chelsea are a good example because last season you probably noticed that they had basically separate squads. They had a squad for the Premier League and they had a squad for the Conference League. Maresca basically said, right, I'm using this competition to play my second string almost, and that's what they did, and that may be why they did so well in the Club World Cup, because a lot of their players hadn't had the kind of the full season that the PSG guys had. But it's difficult for Chelsea next season because in the Champions League, so Maresca can't suddenly say, I'll have a split squad for the Champions League and the Premier League. You have to give it everything. So I wonder if going forward we're going to have bigger squads. We're going to have clubs that now have a squad of 30 players, and all the best players are just going to gravitate to the top clubs. A bit like the cricket situation where you have different squads now for one-day internationals, for test matches, for IPL, all this sort of thing. But that's going to be hard because you guys know if you play for a football club, you want to play in the biggest games. So how do you say to your guys that, look, these guys are playing the Premier League, but I'm going to play in the Carabao Cup next week?
Mark, does that water down the domestic leagues again? Is this what's going to happen?
You would worry about that, yeah, I think so, because, I mean, Chelsea are stockpiling players, aren't they? That you forget they signed Jamie Gittins from Dortmund. I'm watching the game yesterday thinking, where's he going to play? Yeah. They signed Delap, who is a great young forward, but let's be honest, as well as he did when he came on, there's no way he's going to start ahead of João Pedro. So all these players that, Delap could have gone to Man United and started every week, but he chose to go to Chelsea. Obviously, won the Club World Cup, but I worry that a lot of players will go to your Man Cities and your Chelseas and find themselves 6 months, 12 months down the line, not playing enough games, and then their careers kind of just drift away.
Yeah, well, and so let's talk about on the field, Mark, in terms of a European influence, particularly the British teams. How did they? I mean, we heard that PSG decided to treat this as a bit of a break in terms of the training plan that you mentioned, and it was a bit less intense, let's call it, than it might have been during the regular season. Chelsea obviously coming away with a trophy. We can talk about them more in a minute and what we think their aspirations might be after this kind of victory. But how did the British teams, the European teams, sort of prepare for this tournament or go through this tournament? it was a shop window for particularly a team like Inter Miami and the Brazilian teams. Fluminense did well and Palmeiras did well. But were the British teams kind of treating this like a top-level Premier League game or like a Champions League game, or did you feel like their attitude was a little bit down?
It was certainly down at the beginning. I remember Pep Guardiola saying a couple of weeks out that he wants his players to play golf. You know, they were treating it as not as a holiday, but as a kind of a relaxing kind of half pre-season. And I think it was definitely a pre-season approach during the group stage. And I think quite rightly so. I think we saw a lot of City players, you know, they're on the beach, they're enjoying themselves. The Chelsea players have been given a lot more freedom than they would be normally to roam around. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the video of Cole Palmer on his scooter in Times Square, which I thought that was brilliant, because it showed that Chelsea have been growing up about it. They're letting the players have a bit of downtime, because it is an unusual situation, this tournament. It is eating into the players' holiday time. A lot of them would spend their holiday in the US anyway, but they won't be training every day. You know, PSG, slightly different with PSG, because they've had such a long season that they've had it intense all the way, you know, certainly the last 6 months. But let's be honest, when they go back to France for Ligue 1, they can basically take the foot off the pedal for the first 3 or 4 months of the season, knowing that they're going to win it anyway. So I think all clubs have different ways to deal with it. Real Madrid, they decided to postpone Jude Bellingham's shoulder operation, which is going to keep him out for 3 months. They wanted him here for this, but their calculation was that they'd rather have him here in the Club World Cup to go and try and win it, because they know in the first 3 months of the season they'll be fine in the Champions League, they'll be fine in La Liga, and when he comes back in November, December time, he may have had a break, he's fit again, and he's back for the sharp end of the season. So I think a lot of the clubs have taken a different approach to it, but certainly I think it's not been the full-on intense preparation that you would see for Champions League or Premier League. And I think with City being knocked out 2 weeks early, when they look back on that, they'll think that's a bit of a bonus, because it gives them, the players have got 2 more weeks rest.
No, I think overall this is my worry about domestic leagues, and it's something that we spoke about in the last couple of weeks, really, in the pod, Steve. We've discussed about the domestic league and how meaningful it actually is now, whatever league you're playing in around the world. And I think it does carry a lot of weight. But Premier League, at the moment, it seems to be moving away from just how big it actually is. Certainly for the top teams, this Super League is, it will continue to be floated around, won't it? It'll be continued to be mentioned, largely down to the factors of the money and offer that we've seen across this Club World Cup. So it's going to be such an interesting one to see how that develops, Stevie. I really feel that one. And
I think you wonder how maybe the teams that are just on the outskirts of sort of winning the Premier League, like maybe a Newcastle, like an Aston Villa, might a Man United coming back into the fray, how they will try and capitalise on this kind of thing when City and Chelsea are there. Maybe it's Arsenal's year. You think about that being, because it's hard for me to wrap my head around the Premier League teams not attacking the Premier League like it's the number one competition. Yeah. We've been in multiple Premier League teams and even in Champions League campaigns. The Premier League still is king. So
the fans as well.
Yeah, because it's so important. So you wonder how that's going to affect it, and is it an opportunity for somebody to maybe nick a Premier League title when in a normal kind of environment they might just be a little bit short. And I want to ask you, Mark, maybe about Chelsea then, because they shocked me in that final. PSG had been so dominant. In my mind, PSG were up there with the best teams that I've ever seen in my life. I put them in amongst the 09 Barcelona, the 11 Barcelona with Messi and Xavi and Busquets. That good. I had them in that kind of place because of the way they were playing, the tactics of the team. And then we see Chelsea come into that game, and it might be an indication to the might of the Premier League and how physical Premier League teams are, how dominant they can be. And the tactics and the way that they went about that game shocked me. Maresca, in my opinion, sort of put himself right into the upper echelons of world-class managers with that type of game plan in such a big stage. Do you see them kicking on from this out with the fatigue and the fact that he's got about 27 players or something to pick from? Do you see them kicking on? And should we, if Kevin and I were chatting about the Premier League 2 weeks ago, we probably wouldn't have said Chelsea were legitimate contenders. But after this performance, is it enough to say that they are legitimate contenders and that they can kick on from this, use this as confidence, and go on and be very dominant with the age of the squad for a number of years?
No, I think you're right. I think they have got that ability now to challenge for the title. I've written a piece on it today after the game, and the basis that I think now 1 to 11 they have got a team. I think João Pedro's made a massive difference. I think he's just such an upgrade on what they had up front last season. he knits it all together really well. He's strong. He can hold the ball up. He can turn. He's got pace. He looks to be a real top centre forward. And then Cole Palmer is the magic man, isn't he? He could be their Mo Salah. He could be the guy that makes the difference in the tightest games. I think in midfield they're very good. I think you're right about Maresca, the tactical switch of Reece James, which I was a little bit concerned about them being outnumbered in midfield against PSG, because that midfield for me is just the best around. But Chelsea, power, presence, they were able to nullify it. So they've got the players. I do worry a little bit about the defence. I'm not totally convinced about the full-backs. I think that they can be caught out, and I think the goalkeepers are an accident waiting to happen at times. So they might have to strengthen again, but obviously they can't keep buying players. But I think all of the challenges have got unique difficulties this year. I think Chelsea, as we know, they're going to be tired. City, I'm not convinced by the signings they've made. I don't think they're the sort of the top-level signings they've made in the past. Liverpool are the favourites, but we don't know how they're going to react to the Diogo Jota tragedy. That will impact them in ways we just don't know. And Arsenal, if they get Gyökeres over the line, they're obviously going to be very strong, but I'm just not convinced by Arsenal overall. I think there's something missing that I can't quite put my finger on it, but they've made some big signings this summer. So Chelsea have got a chance. And you mentioned Man United. I thought you were joking then when you mentioned Man United. But, but let's be honest, they've got a freeze. They've got no Europe to worry about. They've had a big rest. But, let's avoid them.
So Mark, let's just go back then. Overall then, halftime show aside yesterday, has the Club World Cup been a success then, in your opinion?
Grudgingly, I'm going to say yes, because I didn't really want it to be a success. I was thinking this is too much, and this is, they shouldn't be playing this tournament now. But I think it was a success. But I do think it needs a tweak next time it comes around. I think they need to look at the qualification process, because let's be honest, this time around, it didn't have the champions of England, the champions of Spain, the champions of Italy, the champions of Argentina. For the biggest nations in the world, their best teams weren't there. So, but Red Bull Salzburg were there, and that's a bit weird. So I think they need to look at the qualification process and try and make it more reflective of the teams that are the best teams now, rather than the teams that have been the best teams over the last 4 years. So, but ultimately, the football was great. PSG really kind of elevated the game to a different level at times. So, yeah, it's been a success, but it does need to be looked at the next time it comes around.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Good
Thanks,
man.
Mark.
Cheers, guys.
Well, you'll get Mark Ogden on ESPN. He's wrote quite intensively about the Club World Cup and a lot of things. So it'll be great to get his perspective going forward as well. But just going back to the Club World Cup for us, Stevie, it was an incredible performance by Chelsea yesterday, and everything that went with it, because it was so surprising in itself that the way that they totally dismantled PSG. But something that we spoke about a lot there with Mark, and something that will continuously come up ahead of the World Cup, Steve, is player welfare. And I mentioned it to him a couple of times. It is a growing concern, absolutely a growing concern. And players playing in these temperatures, and what do FIFPro do in terms of how much power do they have? Can they really pull the strings there with the players to potential boycott down the line, Steve? It's going to be so interesting around it. And I think that the players have got to recognise maybe their own power within this as well. And I know I mentioned Enzo Fernandez within that as well, sprawled out on the floor, Steve. It's not a good look for FIFA, is it, when you're seeing these scenes post-game?
I mean, guys that are in their early mid-20s that are as fit as any athlete as you can find are slumped on the floor at the end of these games. You can see the shirts on these guys absolutely drenched. Who knows how much weight they're losing, how much fluid they're losing through that game. A guy like Enzo Fernandez saying how dizzy he felt in that game is concerning. And if they get together and they say enough is enough, we cannot play in these conditions, something serious is going to happen to one of us, then there has to be changes.
Yeah.
So I
think, you said to Mark there, you asked him the question direct, what do you think can be done? What do you think realistically can be done?
Well, I think if they come together as a unit in their union, and their is it FIFPro World Union, they come together and they say, we're boycotting a World Cup unless we get certain conditions.
Yeah,
and
it's a big call.
Listen, it only takes 10, 12 of the top guys, and then everyone will follow. We know who they are, the Messis of the world, and the top players and the top teams. If they come together and say, we are not playing in a World Cup if you're asking us to go into a humid environment. We talked about the most humid environments, but as we know, living here in Toronto can be humid. The worst game I ever played in my life was in DC. It was so humid. Places where you think on the East Coast, near the East Coast,
I think that's
doesn't
the one
get that
thing
bad.
I think maybe outside North America and outside, obviously we know it's going to be hot down in Mexico, but everybody thinks the more north you get, it's going to be a lot cooler. And
not in the summer.
No, it's not, and that's the problem. We were experiencing it now in Toronto ourselves, aren't we, with the weather that we're getting as well. And you've seen it a lot from the players, and or you've seen a lot of the expression from the players as well, not able to cope with that, Stevie. No. That's the thing that I'm going to be so much looking forward to soon, and how this is going to pan out. And, does Infantino, does he do what Mark spoke about there, where he said, look, he can do what he wants and introduce more games into different stadiums. It's going to affect owners that have put so much money into their stadiums that are expected to get 10 games. They might only get 5. I personally can't see that happening. But
if you asked me that a month ago, I'd have said not a chance. Today, I think there's a possibility. Let's call it that. I don't think it's a likelihood, but there's a possibility, because I don't know how they're going to schedule this thing and keep everybody safe. I really believe that when you ramp that up, yes, everybody wants to win, whether they're playing for their club or their country, but when you're at a World Cup for your country, you're willing to put your body into some serious extremes. And so I'm concerned.
It does take an outside influence to really nail that down and look after the players' welfare. That's the way that I would look at it. And I know that we say it sometimes, but supporters and fans sat in stadiums, open-air stadiums like that, in those temperatures, I mean, it's going to be unbearable for them. It's going to be unbearable, isn't it?
It's dangerous. And they've got a lot to think about, FIFA, if they want to have a successful World Cup. If they want the product on the field to be as good as it has been over previous World Cups, they have to make sure that everything is as optimal as they can make it. We never really touched on the pitches, but they were average at best at top-level games. They were better than what we see from the patched-up pitches that we might see in a pre-season.
I go back, you mentioned there as well, we were at Copa last year, Copa semi-final. Pitch was terrible at MetLife.
They were better than that.
Yeah, it seemed like they were better. They have actually moved on a little bit, doesn't it?
But still slow and still not to the levels what these guys play at in Europe every single week. So how do they keep the moisture in the ground? Is it even a possibility?
I think it's going to change our mindset when we're predicting who's going to win this World Cup. We'll be looking at we will naturally go to the nations that have produced in past World Cups and nations that have won their own domestic or their own continental championships.
Well, I think something that we think about there, Kev, is we think, it'll be a young squad that win this, a young and fit squad that win this World Cup, that can handle the heat. But in some ways, it might be a squad that can control the ball and play a slower brand of football and play off, moments in games. As we know, as the games get tighter, it's usually 3 or 4 moments that decide these big games. So, you wonder, is it a squad that has experience, or are they just going to wilt as the tournament goes on, like in Argentina, who are going to be one of the favourites? Can they control the ball and can they have their moments, or it will be young and vibrant, or is it a Spain possession base? It really is going to come into our minds as we think about who will do well in this World Cup. Team that can handle the heat, team that can handle the endurance of these games coming thick and fast. Extended World Cup, there's an extra game in there as well. So I think there's a lot to think about for us as we analyse this. There's a lot to think about for FIFA as they try and manage the schedule here to keep the quality high. And while I believe that Club World Cup was a success, I think what it's brought up, which might be the biggest success of Club World Cup that they don't know yet for FIFA, is that it's brought up some issues for next summer that they just quite simply have to fix if it's going to be a great tournament.
One issue I want to talk to you about is the trophy presentation. On the podium at the end, Donald Trump. What did you make of that?
Was he supposed to be there, or did he just stay?
It looked like he wasn't. I think there was a clip that I saw online of Reece James when he's lifting the trophy, or about to lift the trophy, and he's wording to Trump to, "You're not supposed to be here. You've got to get off." I saw that.
He looked and he asked, and I saw something today where Cole Palmer's in the background with Cucurella, and he's saying, "What's he doing? Does he get off?" I felt like the whole time Infantino was his nerves were on edge because he was next to Trump. He didn't know where to move on, what to ask him to do. It's almost like they were making it up on the spot. Oh, it was horrendous, wasn't it?
It didn't look good. It didn't look good. This is one thing I think across trophy presentation in general, something that's really got to me in the last 10 years, where the guy who's running the organisation has become bigger, is trying to become bigger than the actual event, taking away what the players and what the coaching staff have actually achieved in winning something. They become centre stage around it. We saw it in Qatar. We will absolutely see it next summer in the World Cup. As much as FIFA try to, well, we've seen fines for various nations and players for political statements. Yeah. FIFA is a political organisation. You can't get away from that. They deal in politics more than anything. And next summer won't be any different from that one. You can imagine opening ceremony.
It'll be worse.
Yeah, whenever the US are playing, you can imagine Donald Trump will be at the games because he wants to be centre stage, and of course around the final.
No, it'll be worse. It'll be worse because there's more sponsors, there's bigger crowds, there's more boxes to tick.
More global audience.
There is, and they want to make this the greatest show on earth, and they're in the capital of the world when it comes to USA. So there's going to be, another halftime show. We believe this one was, we'll argue, 22 to 24 minutes, more than a normal halftime, which is 15 minutes. The World Cup one's going to be 10, 15 minutes more than that, Kevin.
Just a quick one on that one. I'm going to come back to that one in a sec. But FIFA can use that. Players need a rest. Players need more break. They can use it
more
as
hydration time.
More hydration time. But I agree. What did you think? What did you think of the halftime show? Terrible.
Totally off. You didn't like it, did you?
I'm a traditionalist, as you well know. I'm so old school in my thinking. Look.
So if they were playing one of your bands, would you enjoyed it more, or you just felt the whole thing?
Well, if Oasis were playing, get Paul McCartney on or something like that.
Oasis or something like that.
Get something like that. No, I don't think it made any difference to me. I'm a traditionalist, and I would prefer. I mean, I think when I first started playing, we used to have 10 minutes for half time. I wanted to have my little break. Managers gets his quick word across to players, whether it's going good or bad, however that performance is going. You get back onto the field, you want to play games, you want to continue the game. Now, we went to 15, now we're going to, which, with it being a World Cup final, if we're saying 22, 24 minutes, it's going to be half an hour, isn't it? It's going to be, they're going to push that time as much as possible, which I think will affect the players anyway.
Well, you can't sit down for that long, you can't rest for that long, so there's going to have to be another warm-up with inside or maybe on the pitch as they come back on. And what that does for me is it affects the integrity of the match, because then it becomes to me like 2 45-minute games. It doesn't become a 90-minute match with a half-time. It starts to become 2 separate games, and you can sort of get more tactics in or more rest, or if you've got the momentum heading into half-time, you can lose it. The other team can change that momentum. So I think it becomes concerning for the integrity of that football match. It starts to take away from why 90,000 people are there and why billions are watching.
How long is too long then?
Well, I'm a traditionalist as well. I'd say more than 15 minutes is too long. I have to say, because you've played this. These guys have played this game their whole lives. They know that 15 minutes is their halftime. So if it gets to 25, 30 and above, far too long.
Yes, I know.
It's a different game. So I hope they consider that. Why are we even talking about this? They're not going to consider it, because it's going to be sponsored by a big brand. It's going to be a massive group. It's going to bring in even more of an audience, because it's going to bring people who want to see the halftime show. Let's be honest. There's going to be people out there who are going to tune in just for the halftime show, potentially.
Less Caldwell, more Coldplay. Is that what we're saying?
I'm up for that. I'm up for that. I'd rather watch Coldplay at halftime than talk anyway.
Yeah, well, I know. It's going to be. It'll be so funny watching how this is going to develop in the next few months, isn't it? I'm looking forward to it, and let's just see how it does, and let's see what Gianni Infantino is going to do.
This is the Park the Bus podcast with Stephen Caldwell and Kevin Kilbane.
So, Stevie, question time. 3 big questions ahead of next summer's World Cup. One thing I wanted to ask you, actually, first off the bat here.
Right.
Which is the more interesting battle going into next summer's World Cup? Obviously, we'll be hyped up around Messi and Ronaldo, but is the more interesting fact Messi against Ronaldo or Doué against Lamine Yamal? Where do you see this next World Cup going? Have we totally moved on now?
No, not totally moved on. We can't move on from these guys when they're still performing and they're still scoring goals, and they'll still be a big part of it, and there'll be stories around them. But I think when it comes to a player that's going to grab the World Cup, it's more likely it's going to be Lamine Yamal or Desiree Doué.
Yeah.
They're guys that are in superb form. They're going to keep it up over next season, but they're players that are improving as well, which is quite a scary thought considering the level they're at the minute. I'll say with Doué, he's got a battle on his hands, Kev, in my opinion, to even play for France. He's really great, but the competition he's against, there is a world, I think, next summer where he's on the bench. He's maybe not starting.
Well, where we've seen Dembele start so often for France is on that right-hand side, isn't it? So that's the thing.
Dembele's position to lose. You've got Mbappe, you've got Barcola. I know Doué seems to be ahead of Barcola at club level at the minute, but there's a battle there for him to get a game.
Yeah.
Lamine Yamal is going to play. He's going to start. He's going to play every minute, I would say, I would suggest. And he's a player for me that is absolutely on the verge of being the greatest player in the world. I still think that there's an argument for others. Messi, for me, is still very, very effective. But Lamine Yamal, by next summer, I'm going to predict, is the superstar on everyone's lips, and he's the player that everyone expects to grab this World Cup by the scruff of the hands and to lift it for Spain.
I think it's a more interesting battle, only because I think Messi will absolutely be the main player for Argentina, won't he? Because that's the way that they built their team around him. And I think Portugal and the effect that Ronaldo could have on the next World Cup. I mean, to be honest with you, you and I have both sat there so often in the studio, not so much written Ronaldo off, because we've never done that. But we have seen Ronaldo not having the influence over his team like Messi has over his Argentina side.
At times in general play is detrimental to their performance, isn't he?
That's right. And I don't see Roberto Martinez changing that. That won't change. He's still going to play him. So it might affect them. We'll see. We'll see as we get closer. But these two guys, Yamal and Doué, Stevie, just watching them and how exciting these guys can become, particularly Yamal, because we know that how he emerged at the last Euros and what he did and some big goals that he scored and what he's done since for Barcelona and how he's progressing. So that, to me, it's not so much even the change in the guards, because I think it's just totally different. I think they will be more exciting individually, particularly Yamal. I think, and I agree with you, he is absolutely on the verge of becoming the greatest player on the planet for what he's achieved both at the Euros and with his club. Yeah,
and I think he has the stature to go and grab that now. And he's playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world, in Barcelona as well. So Yamal, I believe, has the presence and the personality to go and take that on. If his game improves, which it inevitably will, then where will he be by next summer? And he's playing in a side that are tremendous as well. And when I look at Ronaldo, he still has a part to play. He is still going to start, but I think at times he's detrimental for the team. When I look at Messi, he's still a central figure, and I say his levels are higher generally than Ronaldo. But even when I see Argentina recently play Brazil without Messi, they looked a more dynamic team without him. So both the older guys, for me, are in a sort of process. Yeah, I think they do.
I think it's hard.
I think they have to be accommodated.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I agree. It's not that you're saying they're taking something away from the side, because you know what they give.
Of
course. It's also for opposition teams. You know that the opposition react differently when those two are on the field. We know that. But I think there is an element of, we've watched enough of Portugal now. We've seen countless games where we've watched it and gone, look, he's hindering them when they don't have the ball. And when they do have the ball, even at times as well, I think he's affected individuals at times that they're not able to express themselves. But he still produced big goals. Look at him, what he did in the Nations League in big games. He's still producing for them. So you've got to respect that in terms of what he can give that side. Messi, I feel, Messi has way more big moments in the games. Now, they've probably become less and less throughout his career, but he still has 2 or 3 big moments in him that can just change the whole game. And that's why I believe that he's going to have a big impact at the World Cup. But these two guys, I feel as though we'll see much more of a dynamic World Cup from them. And they've probably got a big point to prove on the greater stage. That's the difference, I feel. Those two guys have been there, seen it, done it. And these two guys have got to produce.
Yeah, Messi, for me, is still the most intuitive player ever to play the game of football. So it still makes him effective. Right, I've got a big question for you. Blank will be the best loan move for Luc de Fougereau this summer?
Oh, yeah, I think it's something that, again, we've spoken about over the summer, and I think this summer has been the real emergence. I know you've had, and we spoke about him last week, de Fougerolles, and you've witnessed this emergence and over a number of years. To me, it's still very new, and I've loved watching him. So the emergence was real this summer. I feel that he's got a string of games under his belt, and he's performed at such a high level in each of those games. So now I'm starting to take notice to go, this guy's ready for a big move. And I still, I'm still thinking at times, Stevie, how can this guy produce the level he's been producing when he's got virtually no club game or club time under his belt? It always goes against you, I feel, but this guy seems to defy logic in what he does and what he has been doing. His level next, Stevie, well, first of all, easy to say he has to play. He's got to go somewhere he's going to play week in, week out. Now, is a championship going to be his league? I don't think it is his league, Stevie. Watching him, I would prefer to see him go into mainland Europe. Right. That's what I would like to see.
But would you,
if it was an option,
if you were him or you were his advisor, would you like to see him prioritise Canada and playing at the World Cup, or decide on a pathway that might get him into Fulham's first team in a year's time?
That's it. Well, that conversation I'm sure has been had, and Fulham will send him to the club that they think's right for them. Ultimately, it will be right for them, not Luc de Fougerolles. That's the ultimate thing. So that's a great point that you make there, and these discussions that have around loan moves, because it's now becoming such a crucial part for a player's development at a young age and how they progress into the first team. So if I'm saying that, Stevie, I just don't know if the championship will be too punishing for him at such a young age with so little time. And I think if he went into, I don't know, if say he went into, I honestly thinking like a club in Belgium or a club in Holland. Yes, I think that move for his technical develop, as well as less physical in the championship, but certainly for the technical side of it, which I think he's going to need more. I think he needs to be worked on technically. I don't see a problem really with the physicality. So if he could get a move to Holland, Steve, I think that'd be a great move. Personally, I think that would be a great move. Belgium, I think, would be a good move from a developmental side. Now, if he goes into the championship, he is absolutely going to get the physicality. Week in, week out, it's such a hard league. You know more than ever that is, Stevie. The league is so tough, physically demanding. Might that be the best move for him, for Canada ahead of the World Cup next year? And I don't think it would be. Personally, I don't think it would be. But for his own development, it might be. So it's a catch-22 really for him and what you're doing with him. I don't know, what you're thinking?
For me, absolutely championship. I really believe that would be the best move for him.
That's his best career path for club and country?
Club and country, because I think the championship has improved in the last few years. If you can get a team that play football, and there is some teams that play football.
A lot of them do.
They get the ball down now, they play football in the championships, maybe a bit different from my day where it was very physical and very direct and a gruelling experience for a young player. I think that's going to give him the best chance to go back to Fulham and to play at some point. I don't see him playing in the next year, but maybe go into next pre-season after the World Cup and have a chance at playing minutes for Fulham. And it's also going to give him a high enough level to improve to become potentially a starter for Canada. That's where I see it. I think if he goes into some of these European leagues, it might just be a little bit lax and a little bit off, and one game's high level and the next game's, depending on the level, depending on what league he goes to, depending on where he plays. I just worry, does he get the competition that he needs? He might get it in Jesse Marsh's eyes, but I think career-wise, he's got to think beyond just next
Do you know
summer.
what I think, though, Stevie? And again, it goes back to the point of this lack of game time. He goes into a championship club and the team isn't performing well, so they have 4 or 5, and I'm talking 4 or 5 games. I'm not talking 10 or 15 here. He's out of the team quickly. He's out of the team.
If he makes mistakes at championship, he's going to lose his place, isn't he?
So,
and he'll likely make mistakes as a young centre back.
That's my only thing, that I feel as though because he's so young, the developmental part of his game might be better served elsewhere. But if he goes and crushes it straight away, and he is the main player, like we saw him playing for Canada, if he produces anywhere near that type of performance, then he'll be fine. But I know how unforgiving that championship is, and I know that he could potentially get or become lost really quickly in a league that's so tough. That's what I think.
I think there's a chance that he might have 2 loan moves in this next season. I think there's a chance he goes somewhere till January, does really well, maybe not quite the level.
Very good.
He's got an out clause. It's not quite the level that he hoped it was going to be, but he plays games and he learns and he shows himself up to be a top talent, and then there might be that next move somewhere else, to a high European club or to a real decent championship place at that
hopefully
point.
15 games. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. Yeah. So it's a big one, and I'm looking forward to seeing this development, especially of Luc de Fougereau. So I think we're both in probably the same camp there to see how he develops. Last one, big question here now, Stevie, and I don't know how many times we've spoken about it. I know how many times we're going to speak about this subject going forward. Canada's goalkeeping situation. Yeah. This week, we see Dayne St of Minnesota up against Max Crepeau of Portland Timbers. It's a huge game for both of them, I think, more so than normal. And so, first of all, the question is then to you, does this game this week, does this change anything in your mindset, race for the roster next week or beyond that?
What a question. No, I don't think so. You go into any game and you can have the game of your life, can't you? You know, you can save a penalty and make 6, 10, 15 amazing saves. That could happen.
That's where it always can. Well, that's where any game can change.
And Crepeau's had that in the past. If you remember, in his Whitecap days, he would have games where he'd make record number of saves, and a lot of them really great saves. So there's a possibility that happens.
We won't go there on great saves. Let's not talk about great saves. Well, go
you don't like when I say that, do you? But I think there'll be added pressure, there'll be added scrutiny on the fact that they're playing against each other. They're never going to come in contact, of course, but they're going to feel like the eyes of a nation are on them, even though they'll be playing in the US. But the eyes of Canada will be on these guys, and I think that there'll be added scrutiny. But I don't see it having a massive impact unless one of them have the game of their lives. For me, both these guys have to show higher levels of consistency. Yeah. Game after game, week after week, month after month of making very few, if any, mistakes. And we're not seeing that in their play. We're seeing lapses in concentration. We're seeing little minor mistakes, little positional plays, little places where goals go in that maybe they should save.
We saw it last weekend with Max Crepeau. It's worth noting, isn't it? I felt as though it was poor goalkeeping from him. It was the second goal that he conceded.
Yeah, it was the cross.
So the cross comes in, and he looks a little bit lost initially as the cross comes in because he's concentrating, so I think, on what's happening at the
half coming, half staying. Yeah,
exactly right. And then he doesn't get set, and then he gets beaten. He gets beaten easily, and in my opinion, it's poor goalkeeping. So, I agree with that. And I think so often now, Stevie, we judge goalkeepers on how many saves they've made in a game. And you mentioned Max Crepeau regularly would be making lots of saves in games and things like that. That's not how I feel a goalkeeper needs to be judged. It's totally agree on that one where you're saying it's no mistakes, no mistakes. But it's just that calmness around the team and no erratic behaviour, keeping the back four calm or back five or whichever system you play in front of you. Just level-headed and just make sure that week in, week out, you're putting in the same performance with they're going to make mistakes, and even that around that, if you make a mistake, it's not really a concern to me by making a mistake, but it's more how reacting to that. And I feel as though that both goalkeepers, whenever they've made a mistake, you feel as though that another mistake's going to come straight away, and it's just they've not been able to find any sort of consistency. Maybe Dayne St, in fairness, I'm being a bit harsh because he has been consistent for Minnesota United, but
he's playing in a more solid team though, which helps him as well.
That's right, exactly.
Do you feel like either of these guys are going to take the step that's needed to convince you that they're number one, or is it more? For me, it's more of a deep analysis on what is Dayne St good at, what is Max Crepeau good at, and what do we need, what does Jesse Marsh need for his Canada national team? That to me is like the debate here. I don't see either of these guys becoming that much better they establish themselves more. No,
I don't see two outstanding goalkeepers. I see two good goalkeepers that are very, very close to each other. Just the nature of Crepeau edges me towards Crepeau over Dayne St.
Because of his strengths?
Because of his strengths and how much of I feel as though he's more of a calming influence over the team. I just feel as though when I have been watching Dayne St. Clair, we've both seen enough of him now, that I always feel like there's just a little bit more erratic, or more of an erratic side to his game, and I feel as though there's a mistake that will happen. That's the way I feel, and it doesn't calm me when I'm watching him. So. And again, it might be a little harsh, but that's how I feel when I watch him. I don't feel as though I've got a competent goalkeeper that's going to be just consistent and just be 7 out of 10 every single week. I always feel as though he might be a 9 or he might be a 4. I don't feel as though I've got a level of consistency, whereas Crepeau, I feel as though I'm more towards that little bit of consistency. Yeah. So that's why I edge towards him on that. There's very little between them. I don't feel, as I said, I don't feel that either are outstanding goalkeepers. I don't feel that it's one of Canada's strongest positions. Yeah. Yet I do feel as though that they both certainly have got a good argument to make as to why they should be number 1 for Jesse Marsch next summer.
Yeah, I would say that Max Crepeau, for me, is probably a better fit for the team in terms of what he brings and what his profile and qualities are. But I would say this to add to the debate, that Max Crepeau is not in his best form. I think Max Crepeau has lost a little bit of mobility, whether it was a serious injury or whether it's the age that he's at in his career. I think he's not making saves that he used to make. Yeah. He's maybe lost a little bit of spring in the step as well. So that brings him down a little bit, because then when I look at Dayne St. Clair, he does have that side to his game, and he does have better size, and he'll make, for me, bigger saves than Max Crepeau at this point in his career. So there's this balance here. I'm just getting back to that point that I was making, where I don't think that we're always talking about the challenge. Is one of these guys going to step ahead of the other and bring the 2 or 3 things we feel like they're missing and totally establish themselves? I don't think that's going to happen. I think Jesse Marsch and his coaching staff has got to sit down and say, what is it we really want in a goalkeeper, and who gets closest to this between Dayne St. Clair and Max Crepeau, and stick with them. Do
you think there's a mistake in Dayne St. Clair? That's how I feel. Do you feel that way yet?
Yeah, I feel like that. I don't think he's taken away that from us yet. We've seen 3-4 months of very little mistakes or 0 mistakes. So I still feel like there is something in his game that suggests that he might make the wrong decision at a vital time. And Crepeau's got less of that in him. But I still feel like St. Clair might make a great save, and I don't know if Crepeau's making the saves that we saw 3-4 years ago. So it's a real tough challenge. They're both very good goalkeepers for me. They're both close to each other in competition, but I don't know if either of them yet are convincing enough for Jesse Marsch to make. I believe a goalie, you always want to make a statement and say, he's my guy, because you know that brings so much confidence in the goalkeeper. But I see this rumbling on for weeks and weeks.
Just one last point, and I think this is probably an interesting thing around the Canadian squad as a whole, is so often through your career, I always used to feel when you're playing international football, there'll be scrutiny on you coming into it. And I don't think the Canadian players have had that to an extent because of maybe the nature of the size of the game in this country. Whereas now, there is scrutiny on every single game. I used to find playing international football, playing for your club, there was really no pressure. Yeah. But I'd step off the plane in Dublin and I'd land to play an international game.
You'd feel it.
You'd feel it immediately. You know, you were back page of every single newspaper, radio, TV, constantly saying about you should be playing, you shouldn't be playing, or whatever it would be. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this team, particularly the goalkeepers, cope with that pressure week in, week out ahead of the World Cup, because there's more pressure on them than they've ever had in their career, I feel, isn't it?
It's real, it's tough. I've went through it myself. In fact, we actually played against each other in an international match at Hampden.
That's right, yeah.
When I think he's won 2-0, but we played really poor on the day. I
won't mention the scores that day, Stevie.
You got a goal that day?
I did
you?
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
So anyway, Neil Sullivan made a mistake. He was a great goalkeeper, Neil Sullivan. He made an error. I never played well. And the scrutiny on you...
Yeah.
Even though it's
I know
friendly,
Scotland, the pressure playing for Scotland was big, wasn't it?
And it was huge. And I have to say, at times, it certainly affected me, because I could never find my best form when I was playing for Scotland. So it's going to get real for these guys. To your point, 2-3 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about Minnesota v Portland.
No,
and if it was
true.
St Clair v Crepeau, we wouldn't be talking about that match. But we're highlighting it because both these guys are in the same game and there's going to be added scrutiny. And they have to show that they can handle that. They can handle listening to guys like us talk about their form and scrutinise certain aspects of the game. That is the whole difficulty. One of the greatest untold difficulties around being a professional football player,
without a doubt,
at the highest level, is coping with that kind of stuff.
Criticism, constant criticism.
It's on their shoulders now. They've got to show that they can cope with it, and they have to find another bit to their game, another level. I always say levels, but I don't know if it's percentages or whatever you want to call it, but something extra to win the fight and win the battle and win the starting place in the team.
Yeah, some pressure ahead of the next World Cup.
Don't envy them.
Cup,
well, I do a bit because you get to play a World Cup.
You'd love to be part of it, wouldn't you? But it's a big year ahead now, isn't it?
Yep.
Interesting to see.
Thanks for the chat, mate, as always.
Good man.